Hi guys, been a while. I just wanted to do this quick video about Roger Waters and like what he's been saying recently. It's, I don't want to worry anybody. This isn't going to be a regular thing. This is a one-off sort of rant video, I guess. It's not meant to be, overtly political or anything like that. But I suppose when you talk about Roger Waters, you can't help but make it kind of political. Plus, I've done videos about Pink Floyd and Roger Waters before, so I feel like what I'm saying, at least in some way, pertains to things I've talked about in the past. So, my opinion on Roger Waters has changed a lot over the last 4 or 5 years. If you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said I loved the guy, absolutely loved him, agreed with pretty much everything he has to say about Western imperialism and the UK and all that stuff and Israel and Palestine and everything like that. But I started to actually do more research and I became, I suppose, less of a conspiracy theorist. I used to believe that pretty much almost every conspiracy was true, but apart from Flat Earth, I never believed Flat Earth. I was never that stupid. But I basically believed pretty much all of them. But I started doing some research, and I suppose I started to realize, looking at other countries in the world and looking at the great things that we've done in the West, starting to think that maybe we're not that bad. We certainly aren't perfect. We're very, very flawed. America, Britain, France, whoever. We're very flawed countries with democracies that aren't perfect in any way. But we're certainly not as bad as Russia or China. And to say that we are is just ridiculous in terms of our freedoms and our democracies. But overall, my opinion on Roger, up until recently, was I disagree with what he has to say about some things, but it's not that I'm not a fan of him anymore, really, like as a person. But I think his heart's in the right place. I think he's doing the right thing that he believes in. He believes in love and peace, and he just thinks that the way to obtain it and the certain factors standing in the way of these things are different to what I believe. However, over the last few months, it has now gotten to the point where it's not that I don't like Roger anymore. It's now getting to the point that I'm actually starting to hate the guy, because I'm through with giving him the benefit of the doubt. Basically, there's only so much rope that you can hang out for someone. There's only so much benefit of the doubt you can give someone before you realize that the heart isn't in the right place, that they are just totally egomaniacal, delusional, won't listen to anyone else's opinions, thinks they're right about everything, and has absolutely no intentions of listening to what anyone else has to say. First thing I'd like to mention is Israel, is views on Israel. Again, I'm not saying Israel are perfect, but this was another one where I sort of gave him the benefit of the doubt, kinda, because I thought he's only ever criticizing Israel. He's only saying Israel and the Jews are the the bad people, and he says Jews, and they say Jews because he has criticized British Jews and Jews in other countries. They say that they're partly to blame. So I definitely say Roger's an anti-Semite. And also he blames the British government. That song, The Tigers Broke Free? It's a great song and it's quite emotional, but you realise that it basically says that the British government are to blame for his dad's death in World War II and not the Nazis, you know? So I think his dad would be ashamed some of the stuff he's said recently. I don't think he supports democracy. I don't think he supports peace. I don't think he supports any of these ideas. Certainly not anymore. But with Israel, I gave him the benefit of the doubt because I assumed he just didn't know what was happening there. He just assumed that everything he heard about Israel was true, and he just sort of followed that ideology until a few weeks ago when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast. and he said that Hamas, who are the leaders in Gaza, who are, by any definition of the word, Islamic terrorists, jihadists who want to wipe out, it's in their official charter that Israel has no right to exist. They're the democratically elected government of Gaza. And even Joe Rogan, to put it in the nicest possible way, isn't exactly the most intellectual person. Even he said, well, when was the last time they even had an election in Gaza? And Roger said, oh, I think it was like 2011 or something. So even he admits, like, surely if a government hasn't had an election in 11 years, can you really call them democratically elected? And no, it hasn't been 11 years. It was 2006 when Hamas got into power in Gaza, and they've cancelled all subsequent elections. So can you really call yourself democratically elected if once you're elected you cancel all other elections? So he clearly, if he thinks Hamas are democratically elected, then he clearly doesn't stand for democracy. So that's one thing. He's saying that Israel are the ones who should broker peace, and he also is basically the same about Ukraine. When it comes to Hamas and Ukraine and Israel and Russia, people are saying that the Palestinians are basically like the Ukrainians. The way they're being treated by the Russians is basically Israel treat the Palestinians, and I think it's basically the other way around. It's Israel that have fought for their existence for decades now, and it's people or groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, for example, and groups like that have wanted Israel to be wiped off the map. So I think in terms of, his argument that he supports peace and democracy, that he's willing to support far right Islamic extremists when it fits his ideas. But so ideologically, he's wrong, I'd say. But the worst thing is just how egotistical he is about it and how arrogant he is. At the beginning of each show of his current tour, the This Is Not a Drill tour, which, by the way, if he hates Israel so much and he wants Israel to be boycotted, why is he doing tours in America? And if he hates America so much, why is he doing tours in America? Why is he doing so many shows in America? That doesn't make sense. And why does he live in America? He chose to live there. He pays his taxes there. He does loads of shows over there because money. That's basically it. He's a multi-millionaire who loves being rich, but he also enjoys, complaining about, the divide between the rich and the poor. But, so he won't put his money where his mouth is. If you really put his money where his mouth is, Israel get the vast majority of their weapons from the US. So the taxes that he pays in America, and the shows that he puts on when he does a tour in America, the money that's generated from that, goes towards sending those weapons and buying those weapons and giving them to Israel. So he should put his money where his mouth is there, and if he's going to boycott Israel, he should boycott America as well. But he won't do that because he wants money. So if you really want to pay an extortionate price to go see him mime, then that's what. And he does mime, so it's not even a show really. He's just standing there. He's not even. I don't even think he's playing the bass, but he's definitely not singing. So he has this bit at the beginning of each show that comes up saying, if you're one of those people who says, I love Pink Floyd, but I can't stand Roger's politics, then you might as well fuck off to the bar. And that's another thing that, the sweary old man gimmick is kind of worn off by now. He thinks it's still, he thinks he's being controversial when he says like fuck off and things like that. Like, I'm not afraid to tell Donald Trump to fuck off. Like very impressive. Good for you. But you got to love what happened with Poland. So he had shows scheduled in Poland, and they were cancelled by his manager, and obviously under his approval, because the people of Poland and all the people that were coming to see him had a massive outcry about his basically support for Russia in the Ukraine with the invasion of Ukraine, and basically saying that Ukraine should lay down their weapons. He even sent a letter to the Ukrainian Ukrainian President Zelensky's wife, an open letter explaining the history of Ukraine. You know, the condescension in that, and he even included some of his own lyrics. It just shows how egotistical he is. And when I said too much rope earlier on, I almost didn't want to quote his lyrics because I feel like that would stroke his ego even more. But he's never going to watch this video. But I use his lyrics, or I reference his songs in the least affectionate way possible. So when the Polish people basically said, we don't want to hear anything like that, we're stand up against your views on Russia, because Polish people and Ukrainians and all these ex sort of Soviet states, anyone over the age of 33, 35 that's lived there remembers what it's like to live under a dictatorship, and they don't want that. They take that very seriously. So, you know, they don't take it as easily as we would in Britain and America. We have I suppose, the privilege of never having lived under no one really in living memory. Though certainly we did colonialism in the 60s and things like that, so we had dictatorial aspects, but we're not a dictatorship. They don't fuck about with things like that. The Polish and the Ukrainians, they don't want nothing to do with the Soviet Union. So when the people of Poland told Russia that they didn't want to hear his views, he cancelled his show. He cancelled his shows, and I think that's so telling that he says that bit at the beginning of his show. If you don't like my shows, then you can. If you don't want to hear what I have to say, then fuck off. So the Polish people told him, we don't want to hear what you have to say, and he cancelled his shows, which basically just shows he is only interested in playing in front of people and speaking to people who believe every word he says as gospel, who worship him and think everything he says is right. He has no interest in playing in front of people who disagree with his views or might challenge him. He's basically saying, right, if you disagree with what I have to say, go away. So when the Polish people said, we disagree with what you have to say, he wasn't interested in playing in front of them because he wants to be worshipped. He wants to be told how wonderful he is. And the ego thing, he's always had a massive ego, but it's gotten really bad the last 5 years or so, to the point where I'm almost starting to think he might be a bit deranged, genuinely. We saw how egotistical he was with Pink Floyd back in the day, and he still takes credit for pretty much everything they've done, or the brilliance they did. But if you listen to those demo tapes of The Wall that he brought in originally, they sound like absolute garbage. If it wasn't for Bob Ezrin and David Gilmour, that album would have sounded terrible. They actually turned his musical, what do you call them, blueprints, sorry, and it basically made them into listenable songs. So, but speaking of David Gilmour, he got Pink Floyd back together and released Hey Hey Rise Up earlier this year, which was to support the people of Ukraine. And he could have done that as a solo song. He could have just done it, David Gilmour, Hey Hey Rise Up. But he did it under the Pink Floyd name specifically because it would be more popular. And all the money that is generated goes to Ukrainian refugees. And he also sold a bunch of his guitars a few years ago. Some of them sold for, I think, tens of millions. And every penny went to environmental charities. So basically what I see is a man who talks the talk and another man who walks the walk. Roger Waters, he loves the sound of his own voice. We all know that. But David doesn't talk so much. He doesn't feel the need to constantly shove his opinions down people's throats. But he actually does things. He actually, does things for charity, and actually, he writes a song I guess he co-wrote Hey Hey Rise Up in some ways. He also did it with, it was a collaboration Of course, it wasn't just Pink Floyd. It was, I can't remember the name of the guy, sorry, but it was a Ukrainian musician who collaborated on it. But basically, Roger talks the talk, or David walks the walk, and I have no problem with musicians being political. But what I have a problem with is when they basically don't even care about music. And Roger said that the music, that the lyrics and the politics come first. And he's only released one album in the last 30 years, so it's like, and it wasn't even that good. So it's like, why even continue to be a musician? Why don't you just become a political spokesperson? Just have that as your job. I read a good comment on, I think it was on Twitter or Reddit. Someone went to his show and they said it wasn't like a musical show. It was a series of political rants with musical interludes. Roger Waters playing the songs isn't the main point of the show. It's shoving his politics down your throat. That's why his shows exist. If it was really about the music, then he wouldn't be miming. Because miming's insulting. No matter nobody should mime, no matter what the circumstances. But I think "Hey Hey Rise Up" it's definitely the most overtly political song of the post-Waters Pink Floyd era. They did do some ones that talked about social issues, like "On the Turning Away," "Dogs of War," "Take It Back," songs like that. They talked about like social issues or world issues, but never as overtly political as a Roger Waters song, for example. But I think it's quite fitting that this is probably going to be the last ever Pink Floyd song, and it's probably maybe their most overtly political one ever. Because it's not just saying war is bad, it's a specific message about a specific war, saying this is how we feel. So I think that's quite fitting. So the people who say, oh, the post-Roger era, there's no politics, there's no grittiness with the lyrics, and it's like, well, there you go, there's some politics for you. So yeah, that's basically just what I wanted to talk about. Roger Waters is an arsehole. He always has been, really, but I think he's really become like an arsehole this year, specifically. And one last thing I want to say is I'm not one of those people who, I've seen people who've retrospectively changed their opinion on Pink Floyd and their music in general. I'm not saying Roger Waters hasn't written brilliant lyrics over the time, or he hasn't contributed to brilliant songs. Of course he has. He has been one of the greatest artists of the 20th century, but he takes too much credit for it. He doesn't give enough credit to the other people. And he has written some of the most amazing lyrics. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that The Dark Side of the Moon or Shine On You Crazy Diamond, all these, or Animals, don't have great lyrics. They do. So I'm not going to be one of those people I'm not going to throw out my Pink Floyd collection. And I'm not going to, I've seen some people go, now that I think of it, Pink Floyd were never really that good. It's like, fuck off. Like, I don't like it when people do that. So separating the art from the artist, I view the old Roger Waters of, I suppose, Amused to Death backwards, though he did have some of these ideas. I almost view him as like a different person. I feel like, it's his ego, it's the people that go to see him, he reads the comments on Facebook, or the people saying, oh, thank you, Roger, you're for being a voice of reason in this world, you're the only person that gives me hope. And I'm not saying he doesn't give people hope and things like that, but I think it is misguided, and misguided. But the people who get the hope should be getting it from other places. But Roger, I think, is just he's lost it. So yeah, unfortunately. So Team Galmore, definitely. Slava Ukraine and Team Patton. You know what I'm talking about.